Yeah.
Well, this lady was a real progressive thinker, and so she let me adapt that series in Spanish, and you know, I don't really know how far it went, but I ended up being a lot more comfortable with what you know was going on. I tried to do a little work in social studies too, but most of what I did was in biology. Another thing that occurred to me when you said the principles, I think it came across strongest to me in Vertus science classes, the principle that there's something there in every student. And I remember she started getting us interested in science fairs, but she would say, you can go to the regional science fair, you can take a project to the regional science fair, but I'll work with you after school, whichever ones of you want to do that. What I'm really interested in is an organic science fair and what we produce for that. And then she proceeded to get amazing things out of the kids who weren't the exceptional students in terms of, you know, like reading ability and sophistication. And I remember there were two brothers that she found were extraordinary artists. They got in a lot of trouble too. I can remember her going and getting them out of jail on Monday morning so they could come to school. But the two of them, one year, did a mural of the evolution of man around the old science room. She got some kind of paper that went all the way around, and they drew the evolution of man. And it just took your breath away. People came just to see that mural. And I know there were several Mondays when she had to get them out to be able to come to school. And I remember she did a lot of creative things, but she would sit down and talk to the kids. One boy worked at Greer's as soon as he got out of school every day, so he was in charge of produce. And she helped him find the data on how long it took, where the produce came from and how long it took, and how many nutrients were still left in the produce by the time it got to the shelf. And that, he charted all that, and that was his science project. The one thing that was remarkable when she was working on that was she did what she said. She worked with those of us who wanted to go to the regional fair after school, and you took an award the next year. Several kids went, but anyway, organic ended up one year, the year I was a junior, with 7 top awards at a regional science fair, which had never happened ever. And given the size, 40 high school students, and the equipment in the science building, nobody could believe it. But of course, what it was that she simply had that ability to trigger a creative idea. And creative ideas went a long way at a regional science fair.
I think I remember when I visited with Ken and Nancy right after Mother's funeral, and we were reminiscing about her teaching science at the organic school, and we remembered one of her favorite problems when you got into her general science class was she was interested in erosion, and she was trying to get us to get some sense about what the volumes of water would be when when we had one of our 6-inch torrential downpours, and she wanted us to understand about weight and volume. So we had to, figure out how many acres constituted Fairhope, how much water volume and weight would come down in a 6-inch downpour on that kind of, she could just spin those problems out forever and ever and ever, and everybody's sitting there, of course, doing their calculations pencil and paper, but you began to appreciate that science wasn't necessarily fancy equipment. Science was how you looked at something with your head. And I think that's an incredible skill that she brought to that whole enterprise, and made us understand that we didn't have to have a lot of fancy equipment. Yeah, it would have been wonderful if we'd had fancy equipment. We'd have done other kinds of problems, but that we could do problems in our head even because we didn't have fancy
I
equipment.
have to just interject here. Kenneth said that Berta Horne was the best teacher he ever had, including
Donnie Buckwell was.
Yeah,
She had something extraordinary.
absolutely. Oh, there's so many other things.
I didn't know that you were collecting essays, but I remember now that we're talking that at Bank Street, I wrote, I've taken 2 degrees at Bank Street, one in K through 6 and one in supervision administration. And I remember writing about the gully. So I'll send that to you because I love that essay about the gully, what gullies meant to us. I did another one on memories about organic. So I'll send that one too.
I think it's, and I think, Dot, it's very hard for people not to think this is underwater basket weaving. I've always been concerned about how to, because people hear, oh, you went to the gully. Well, it was a play school kind of thing. Nobody understanding that what we were doing was education at its very, very best.
Yes,
And
but then they don't understand very much about education.
No.
Because like when I was studying geography, to teach geography, I remember reading some famous geographer saying that everything that you need to learn about a river, you learn with a hose and a pile of sand.
Exactly.
So that if you don't understand that, then, you feel
But
like
we
you're
got it
just
in some other way. I mean, we didn't sit and have the teacher draw a picture on the board and say, this is how a river makes a delta kind of thing. And we take that in and then give it back to her. We had the holes, we had the sand, we had the gullies. And it was a different, it's that different quality of that process that makes it so critical, I think. And there are just so few places where you can get that. I mean, I've talked to people who don't have any kind of recollection at all of what their elementary school years were like, that are as intense as ours are after being here.
I think that it will take years to understand the sophistication of Marietta Johnson. That's my opinion. But for example, I always had trouble with math, and when I began going over some of those problems with Jonathan, who teaches, his specialty is learning disabilities, he said, well, clearly you had a learning disability in mathematics. And he said, now, I wonder, how you ever did as well as you did. And I thought, since you didn't know you had a disability and certainly weren't treated for it, and I thought about that, and do you know what I realized? It was folk dancing. Folk dancing compensated, learning to folk dance taught me forms of compensation for that disability, because I have watched what he does with kids.